Hey, what's going on, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Andrei Chikatilo, the infamous serial killer, and the many horrible things this man has done. But in order to get into that, we need to dive into the past of Andrei and see just how his life unraveled. Born on October 16, 1936, in the village of Yabluchink, in the Sumy Oblast of the Ukrainian SSR, to parents that were collective farm laborers. They lived in a one-room hut, as his parents received no wages for their hard-earned work, and instead received the right to cultivate a plot of land behind the family hut. They seldomly had sufficient food. Chikatilo didn't even have bread to the age of 12, and they often ate grass and leaves in an effort to fight off hunger. Throughout Chikatilo's childhood, he was often told by his mother Anna that before he was born, he had an older brother named Stefan, who had been kidnapped at the age of 4 and cannibalized by starving neighbors. But it has never been established whether this incident actually occurred or not, or if he even had an older brother named Stefan, or if this person ever existed at all. Nonetheless, Andrei Chikatilo recalled his childhood as being blighted by poverty, filled with hunger, and with war all around him. When the Soviet entered the Second World War, Chikatilo's father, Roman, had gotten drafted into the Red Army and would later become a prisoner after being wounded in combat, and sometime between 1941 and 1944, Chikatilo would witness the effects of the Nazi occupation of Ukraine, and which he described as horrors, adding that he witnessed bombings, fires, and shootings from which he and his mother would hide in cellars and ditches to get away from all of that. And on one occasion, Chikatilo and his mother were forced to watch their very own hut burn to the ground. Chikatilo and his mother would have to share a bed, and he was a chronic bedwetter. It got so bad his mother would berate and beat him for each offense. In 1943, Chikatilo's mother gave birth to a girl named Tatiana, and because Chikatilo's father had been drafted in 1941, he could not have been the child's father. And as many women were raped by German soldiers during the war, it's been highly suggested that Tatiana was conceived as a result of rape committed by a German soldier. And as Chikatilo and his mother lived together in a one-room hut, this rape had to have been committed in Chikatilo's presence. Chikatilo was shy and physically weak, often with a swollen stomach caused by hunger, which would cause Chikatilo to faint both at home and at school. And he was consistently targeted by bullies who mocked him over his physical stature. At home, Chikatilo and his sister were constantly berated by their mother. She was harsh and unforgiving towards her children, whereas the father was a kind man. Chikatilo developed a passion for reading and memorizing data. He often studied at home to both increase his self-worth and to compensate for his myopia, which often prevented him from reading the classroom blackboard. But, regardless, to his teachers, Chikatilo was an excellent student upon whom they would regularly bestow praise and commendation. By his teens, Chikatilo was a model student and editor of his school newspaper. He would also become chairman of the People's Communist Party Committee and delegated the task of organizing street marches. And on top of that, he was the only student to complete his final year of study and graduate with excellent grades. As time went on and now entering into puberty, he would develop impotence, and as a result of that, he would struggle with self-hatred. Shy in the presence of women and not knowing how to express himself, he would end up jumping on an 11-year-old girl, knocking her to the ground and ejaculating as the girl struggled in his grasp. Chikatilo would soon apply for a scholarship at Moscow State University, and although he would go on to pass the entrance examination with an excellent score, his overall grades were not considered good enough, which led Chikatilo to believe it was because of his father's tainted war history, since his father had been marked a traitor for being taken prisoner in 1943. But It was because of Chikatilo's performance, and instead of enrolling in somewhere else, he would travel the city of Kirks in 1955, where he worked for 3 months and then enrolled at a vocational school with the aim of becoming a communications technician. Chikatilo would eventually find himself a girlfriend with a local girl, and on 3 different occasions the couple would attempt intercourse, but was unable, and as a result of that, she would break off the relationship. But now, upon his 2-year vocational training, Chikatilo would relocate to Ural city of Nizhny Tagil to work on a construction project, and also undertake correspondence courses in engineering with the Moscow Electrotechnical Institute of Communication, until being drafted into the Soviet Army. In 1960, now upon completing his service, Chikatilo would return to his native village to live with his parents, briefly working alongside them on a collective farm. There, he had met a freshly divorced woman, but just like the other woman, they would break up just after 3 months due to his erectile dysfunction, and on top of that, his peers would now know about it from his ex-girlfriend, coming to her friend for advice on how Chikatilo could possibly overcome the problem. He was constantly made fun of for it, to the point of almost committing suicide by trying to hang himself, but stopped by his mother and some neighbors. In 1961, Chikatilo would run away from his homeland and find a job in communications engineering in a town called Rostov-on-Don. Located in Russia, he would find an apartment to live close by and marry a woman named Feodosia Odnicheva, whom he'd meet through his sister. Chikatilo would enroll in Rostov University, studying Russian literature and philology shortly before obtaining a degree while managing region sports activities, before beginning his career as a teacher at Novoshakhtinsk. But Chikatilo was largely ineffective as a teacher. Although knowledgeable, he was seldomly able to maintain discipline in his classes and was regularly subjected to mockery by his students, who he claimed took advantage of his modest nature. In spring of '73, he would commit his first known sexual assault by grabbing a 15-year-old girl by the breast and genitals, ejaculating while she struggled against his grasp. Months later, he beat a teenage girl whom he locked in his classroom, and there would be a handful of teachers who caught Chikatilo fondling himself in the presence of students, but said nothing. At one time, he was tasked with making sure students who boarded the school were present in their dormitories in the evenings, and on several occasions he was known to enter the girls' dormitory in hopes of seeing them undress. It got to the point where the school had asked him to resign or he would be fired, and he eventually would, only to be hired to teach at a technical school, but his career as a teacher would come to an end in '81. In September of 1978, Chikatilo had moved to Shakhta, where he would end up committing his first murder. It was on the evening of December 22nd. He lured a 9-year-old girl named Yelena Zakhanova to an old hut which he had purchased. He attempted to rape this young girl but failed to get an erection. When the girl struggled, he choked her and stabbed her 3 times in the abdomen, ejaculating while stabbing her. The body of Yelena Zakhanova would be found in the Grushevka River under the bridge. Numerous pieces of evidence linked Chikatilo to Zakhanova's murder, like spots of blood in the snow close to the house he had purchased. Neighbors said he had also been present in the house on the evening of the 22nd. Her backpack had also been found on the opposite bank of the river at the end of the street, indicating that the girl had been thrown into the river. A witness had given police a detailed description of a man closely resembling Chikatilo, whom the witness had seen Chikatilo talking to Zakhanova at the bus stop where the girl had been last seen alive. On September 81, Chikatilo would encounter a 17-year-old boarding school student, Larissa Tichenko, standing at a bus stop as he left a public library. Chikatilo would lure Tichenko to a forest near the Don River with the pretext of drinking alcohol, and when they reached a secluded area, he threw her to the ground before tearing off her clothes and attempting intercourse. But when achieving an erection failed, he He forced mud inside her mouth to muffle her screams before beating her with a stick and strangling her, as he had no knife, and mutilating her body with his teeth before covering her with leaves, branches, and torn pages of newspaper. However, she would soon be found the following day. June 2nd, 1982, 9 months after the second murder, Chikatilo traveled by bus to purchase vegetables, and having to change buses, he instead decided to continue his journey by foot, and on the walk he would encounter a 13-year-old girl named Lyuba Buryok, who was walking home. The two would walk until their path was shielded, and without hesitation, Chikatilo would pounce on Buryok, knocking her down to the ground and dragging her to the nearby undergrowth, where he tears off her dress and kills her by stabbing and slashing her to death as he's performing intercourse. When she was found, there was knife wounds to the head, neck, chest, and pelvic area, and her eyes were also gouged out. Chikatilo killed at least 50 people, and many of the victims were mutilated, caused by stab wounds, and he would often bite and tear flesh from the victims' bodies, also biting their neck and chest area and with their eyes gouged out, and the adult female victims were often prostitutes. Chikatilo would strike again, only this time a witness would be on board of the bus he was on. Watching his every move, he'd watch him get off the bus, leading a girl away by the hand. Chikatilo would end up luring her to a nearby cornfield and stabbing her 50 times around the head and body, ripping her chest open and removing her stomach and uterus. On November 6, 1990, they noticed Chikatilo coming off a trail. Suspicious of it, the police took note of it, and later someone would find a body on the trail, right where Chikatilo was previously around. Finally, on November 20th, 1990, Chikatilo would be arrested. At first, he would not confess to the murders, but a psychiatrist by the name of Alexander Boganovsky would get Chikatilo to open up about the crimes. He would even show police how he captured and killed his victims. He even uncovered missing victims as well by taking police to locations they were buried. Convicted of 52 murders, Andrei Chikatilo was sentenced to death. He would be executed by a single gunshot to the back of the head on February 14th. Yes, Valentine's Day. It's truly sickening what this man has done. It's unimaginable. To say disturbing is an understatement. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and on that note, I will see you on the next one.